I'm finding a cycle of generational addiction. Everyone watching this right now is predisposed to addiction due to evolution. I don't think addiction is about the drug. For me, it was never about the coke. It was never about the sex. It was never about the food. It was never about the drinking, the weed. It was always about the feeling inside of me that felt empty, that felt like I needed to fill.
Exactly.
Addiction is not about the drug. It's about what you're feeling inside of you that makes you do it. Sorry. Woo! Oh, are we going?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, I just ran in here. I had so much spit in my mouth. That's what she said. Okay.
But
Hello. Welcome back to your friend's podcast.
Big smiles for the camera.
Yes. Welcome back. I'm your host, Megan Page, and this is my lovely guest today, Cohosh, returning again.
Hello, people. Welcome.
Okay.
But hi, Megan.
Hi. How are you feeling today?
Excellent. A little tired. It is pouring rain outside. It's dumping right now. We risked our lives to be here.
We did.
I hope you guys can subscribe, please.
Please leave a like.
Flick that little bell. Just flick it like that.
It would make my grandpappy so proud.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your support, people. We need some subs. Let's go.
Yes. Woo! All right. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about addiction. And it's not really going to be drug addiction. It's kind of going to be addiction in general. But we will be scratching a lot of surfaces that have to do with drug addiction specifically. Yeah.
It's a good topic. A little heavy, but I know this is really important to you, Megan. So, it's a tough one because it feels like there's so much responsibility in this topic, but at the same time, I feel like your story, my story, if anybody, like just one person can be helped by what they hear, then it's all worth it. And I really hope that we can help some people with this discussion. So
Absolutely.
As nervous as I am or apprehensive, that's kind of what's, weighing it out, the positive versus the negative, is I know that hopefully our stories can help other people out there.
I completely agree with you. And I just kind of want to say, I think we were talking on the phone a couple days ago, and we both kind of agreed that this isn't an episode that we necessarily want to do. It's not going to be an episode that we're going to be comfortable doing. Oh, I need to catch my breath because, when I ran in here, I'm, fucking out of breath.
Yeah, but, I'll take over for a second while you catch your breath.
Thank you.
But,
I'm out of shape, dog.
I know. As skinny as you are, you ran 12 feet.
I know.
Didn't necessarily want to do, but one of the things that I noticed for me personally, this is what I was going to say, is being in recovery, or a lot of times in life in general, if something's uncomfortable, you have to move towards it.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of life and of facing challenges, is you have to do things that are uncomfortable. This is how we grow. This is how we hopefully reach out to other people, like our listeners and our viewers that we care about, and the other people who are struggling right now. That's who I'm thinking of specifically, is the people who are struggling right now. And there's a lot of them. And as we'll get into, one of my friends just relapsed 3 days ago. So it's fresh on my mind. And I didn't really want to cover this. I wanted to continue going with the missing people thing because I'm obsessed with the mystery and trying to solve it. And to everyone that commented in the last episode, thank you. I know David Pilates has come up with his theory, the UFO connection. I got it loud and clear. Appreciate it. But I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be good no matter what.
I completely agree. Kind of just weighing out the pros and cons. This is a very scary thing to do. It's a very vulnerable thing to do, to open up about the addictions that you've been through, the addictions that you've seen in other people, in loved ones, that has shaped your life in good or bad. The pro for me is kind of like exactly what you said. If us being vulnerable and speaking about topics that a lot of people don't talk about a lot, I don't see it widely talked about in a lot of podcasts. It's kind of just something that's looked over. I think there's a lot of things that are just swept under the rug, especially if you're a young person. Like if you're 21, Nikki Glazer, I love her as a comedian. I was listening to her, and she was kind of talking to this 21-year-old who had done coke and drank, and she was just kind of saying, oh, well, I quit drinking in my late 20s, so, you're fine. You're 21. You're supposed to be in this. You don't have to stop anything until your late 20s. I disagree with that. I think that if you know you have a problem, even if you're 21, there's no age for addiction. People can start doing meth at age 15.
Yeah, I started doing PCP at the age of 12. I'm just kidding. No, I didn't. That's not true. Sorry about that.
Damn.
I got to make it fun a little bit, people. But no, that's the thing that they say about addiction, or that I've learned, is addiction doesn't know any gender, it doesn't know any age, it doesn't know any socioeconomic class, race. It doesn't discriminate.
Absolutely. Addiction don't discriminate. Don't give me no hate.
Just participate. We're also rappers. I don't know if you guys realize that. We have a hip-hop group.
We do.
No, we don't. Actually, we don't.
I wish. Sometimes I wish.
One day.
I have some stats for you.
I love stats. I have a stat fetish.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, podcast over.
Podcast, it's a wrap. Okay, so.
Just turn my mic off, Phil.
So, something that is compelled me to do this podcast, and kind of as you were saying, you can sense that this podcast topic is huge for me and important to me, and I just want to say I appreciate you for coming back and being able to sit here, let me bounce these ideas off you, questions. Now, I'm finding a cycle of generational addiction. Everyone watching this right now is predisposed to addiction due to evolution. In the world of addiction, if you have a parent who's an addict and maybe they pass down their gene to you, like me, that makes me 50% more likely to become an addict. Add in the environmental factors and the heritage, that now makes me 4 times as likely to be an addict. The odds aren't very in my favor here. And that's something I've kind of come to realize. And a big question that was huge for me, which I was actually the reason I want to do this podcast, was how do we start preventing addiction in Gen Z and millennials? What are the first steps in doing this? And I will be answering that question throughout the podcast.
Do you actually have an answer that you formulated?
I do.
Really?
I do, yes.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm going to explain it like this. Addiction thrives in darkness.
Yes.
Addiction thrives in isolation.
Amen.
It thrives in those dark places, those scary places, being alone. What if we started shining light on it? What would happen then?
That is an amazing point. And you just brought up a very interesting study that they did. So have you heard about the study with lab rats and addiction and isolation?
Yes, but refresh my memory.
This is insane. So this was a while back, and I hope I don't want to steal your thunder, because just to let you guys know too, Megan and I don't really rehearse what we're going to say over lines. We might go over questions, but I like to, and I think Megan too, we like to do this sort of stream of consciousness for you guys, so that it's more of like we're hanging out talking and it's not scripted. It's just off the top and from our hearts and souls. But so this study, I believe it was with cocaine, but they took a lab rat and they gave it everything that it needed in its cage, but they also were giving it cocaine, I believe. It was cocaine or amphetamine through its water. And the rat was in the cage by itself. And so the rat just continued to drink and water, drink, use and use and use until it wasted away and died. It didn't eat, it neglected everything else. They took the rat and put it in a cage with other rats, same conditions, the same amphetamine or cocaine-laced water, and just by being in a social environment with other rats, it didn't have the need to use. So the other rat used and used and used until it died. But this rat, they found just by being in a social circle, not being isolated, it actually had no desire to use, which is amazing. So this was a TED Talk that I saw. And so the conclusion that this guy came up with was essentially our approach to healing or stopping drug addiction in this country or in the world is completely wrong, because we take people, we throw them in a cage, we take away their rights. How many years ago was it that buying or selling or having marijuana or growing marijuana or cannabis, as I like to call it, not marijuana, the slang term, would being in possession of it would land you in prison. There was people who had 3 strikes and were doing 25 to life in prison because of it, and now it's legal. Now you can grow 6 plants. But we took people, we isolate them, we put them in a cage. Then when they're released, all of their rights are taken away. And then they have a label and a stigma on them. So they're isolated even further in society. They get certain rights taken away, and they continue to use. And we have this cycle because everything, our whole approach in this society to labeling people dirty, if you're sober, you're clean, and putting the addict label on you is a way to ostracize this person and to isolate them further until they eventually die high or drunk, or like the 5% of us who actually make it die sober. But it's completely backwards. We should be embracing those people, taking them, surrounding them with love, and not casting them out of society and isolating them. That's the completely opposite of what we should be doing, but here we are.
Absolutely. I mean, addiction thrives in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Depression thrives in isolation. I can't remember a time where my mind consumed me more than when I was isolated. And I think you bring up an amazing point to where these people, they're going back and we are isolating them. We're putting a stigma on them. We're looking at them for their addiction, not who they are as a person, not what have they been through in their life that led them there. I think it's called nature, nurture, and neighborhood. Let me find the notes on this because this shit is really interesting and I don't want to butcher it.
And while you're looking for that, I was going to mention too another very interesting theory or thought experiment, which actually was an experiment. They actually did it in Portugal, I believe. They legalized all drugs. Did you hear about this? This was years ago. So it was interesting to see what happens if you take away the criminal penalties for using drugs and you just made everything legal. Would that make drug addiction and drug use skyrocket, or would it make it decrease, basically go down? And what they found in Portugal was that actually the crime rate and addiction rates and drug use rates actually went down.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of like the same thing they were trying to do in Oregon, right?
I'm not sure.
I believe they made like everything. I think heroin's legal there, shrooms. Love that shrooms are legal. I support that.
Oh, yeah. Psilocybin, bitches.
Yeah. Have you done shrooms before?
I'm on them right now, as a matter of fact.
Are you really?
No, but...
I was like, let me have some.
Oh, but no, I do have a friend that owns a smoke shop, and he actually gets them shipped in from Oakland.
Are they like little chocolates?
Huh? The chocolate bars? Yep, the chocolate bars and the gummy bears. And so it's legal, by the way, in Oakland, for those of you who don't know, psilocybin. And in Oakland, in the Bay Area, they were actually on the forefront of doing tests with microdosing ketamine, which I participated in that study.
Really?
Hello. And but I think I got the placebo. And but I thought I was so high. No, it wasn't about getting high. Actually, I participated in the study because I believe in bringing these things to market. In other words, if you could find things like ketamine, psilocybin, microdosed, helping people with psychological issues and mental health issues, if you could find a way to treat them with these things, then I'm all about it. So I participated in that study to try to bring it to market.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm a huge advocate for psilocybin, for shrooms, especially like how they're studying it to treat depression.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every time I had a shroom trip, for a month after that, I'd have less anxiety. I'd feel happier. and I think it's really cool that they're experimenting with that. I've always wanted to try microdosing because I feel like that would be good for me.
Yeah.
But I know you kind of have to be careful, and a microdose is a very specific dosage.
Yeah.
And I like taking a lot of shrooms.
Yeah, and that's the thing is with these the candy bars and things, it's a very specific dose because if you're like me and sort of if you have too much, or even with cannabis or weed, like I will get completely paranoid and anxious. So it would do the exact opposite. It has to be a very specific dose. And that's the thing, like drugs, I believe they all have their place in society. If there's a proper actual medical benefit to it, which is why I'm a part of the CBD industry as you are or you were, then why not give it to the people? I mean, if it's making an impact, a positive impact, because obviously pharmaceuticals aren't working. Obviously the war on drugs and our whole approach to it hasn't been working.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know if you got the stats, but yeah, after that, I have stats for you too to prove that this isn't working, which is part of why we're doing this podcast, because addiction is at an all-time high.
Yeah, absolutely. It is such an all-time high. Opioid epidemic, all of that. So some stats I have here. All right. And I thought this was interesting because addiction, it's not really being called addiction anymore. It's being called the disease of addiction. It is considered a disease. It's a chronic relapsing and remitting problem. People come to it with different degrees of vulnerability, and the risk for it can be summarized as nature, nurture, and neighborhood, which means nature aspect. For example, if you have a biological parent or grandparent with addiction, you are at an increased risk of getting addicted yourself. If you have an occurring mental illness, if you have certain characteristics like impulsivity, nurture is kind of if you grow up in an environment where you experience a lot of trauma, you're at an increased risk. If you grow up in an environment where your caretakers or your model uses drugs and alcohol or just have these addictive behaviors and use them as a coping strategy, you are at an increased risk. And then neighborhood is pretty simple. If you just kind of like have more access to drugs, if you're exposed to those behaviors, you're more likely. But again, some people bring more vulnerability into the equation, and some people are more vulnerable than others. And you may be in that category like I am, where if you find something that's reinforcing and pleasurable, you tend to cling on to it. And those are just kind of like the stats for how addiction starts, the environment, the behaviors, kind of just some of the things that can create addiction.
Awesome. Yeah, good research. And so here is the statistic that I have that I mentioned to you right before the podcast. I was showing you this article that I printed out, and the sources that I use, because as they teach you in journalism, you always have to cite your sources. And I try to be obviously, I mean, I'm not a journalist professional, but I'm independent, indie, amateur, but I still try to stick to the tenets of journalism. So I'm taking the stats from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and I wanted to read a little bit from this article that I think, in the New York University. So the COVID-19, so one of the interesting things back in 2020 that I was looking at, because I was on an ambulance during the outbreak when everything was breaking, like hitting the fan, back in the days where there's toilet paper shortages and essential workers could only be out at certain times. And I was on the front lines, like during the very beginning in 2020, and then I would go to work, transport patients, 6 to 8 COVID positive patients a day, come home, turn on the news, and see the hysteria and the pandemonium. And the things that I was seeing on the news weren't adding up in real life, which is why I started doing a podcast on it back then called Cohosh Covers Controversy, in case you guys want to check it out on any of the podcast forums or venues. But I did one about the COVID-19. And one of the things that I found interesting, and I started looking at, because for me, when this whole quarantine happened, I sort of took a step back and I was looking at this as an observer, sort of studying human behavior and our reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that I noticed and thought about was how this is going to impact addiction and violence and crime statistics. Because through the COVID pandemic, there's so many things skyrocketed. There was divorce rates, there was domestic violence, drug addiction, suicide attempts. I remember talking to a nurse in an ER in the Bay Area, and she said that suicide attempts quadrupled for cases that were being brought into the ER. And I was interested to see, so how is our reaction to the pandemic going to impact society specifically? Is it going to be worse than if we would have done nothing and let it play out? Or is it going to be better and improve it? And what actually happened in hindsight and looking back on it as we were going through it, our reaction or overreaction actually, I think, overall made the pandemic worse as far as all of the negative outcomes that have come from it with addiction and crimes and the impact, the psychological impact on human beings, on our society and children especially, as to where if we would have just let it run its course and not let the politicians and the media breed all this fear and hysteria into the public, it would have done far less damage, I feel like. Even if we would have done nothing and just treated it like another flu strain, I think a society would have been a lot better off. But in this article, I just want to read this real quick. It said, drug overdoses have soared during the COVID-19 pandemic, with U.S. overdoses deaths topping 100,000 during the 12-month period ending in April of 2021. Researchers are beginning to untangle how the pandemic and strategies for preventing the spread of the virus, such as stay-at-home orders, may have contributed to this increase in deaths, from interruptions to harm reduction programs to isolation and worsening mental health. So that's an important fact. For the first time, I believe in recorded history, the deaths from overdoses and opioids in particular went above 100,000 in a 12-month period. As a matter of fact, so many people died of overdoses that for the first time, and I think in our history as well, it actually decreased the average lifespan.
Wow.
So I don't know if you have, if you look up, Google the stats, or if you look at an almanac, it has for every country the lifespan rate for like males, I think is in their 70s, maybe 74, something like that. And then females, they live longer than us. I think it's like 78 or maybe in the 80s. So because so many people were dying prematurely, it actually decreased our average lifespan of the average male and female. And that's like how big of an impact that drug use and addiction and alcoholism has played. I mean, that's insane. More than 100,000 people in 12 months.
That's fucked up, and it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
When should a society get to that point? How did we get here? It shouldn't be like that. No. And I really like what you said about like the isolation aspect. Mm-hmm. Like we were saying, addiction thrives in isolation. It makes perfect sense to me that the drug overdoses, the addiction increased over COVID. I mean, we were alone some of us were completely alone in our houses. Maybe we weren't quarantined with someone else, and you're just alone with those thoughts. I mean, that breeds just negativity.
Yeah.
No, we're not meant to be alone. We're not sharks. We're not meant to be alone, not touch each other. We are so fragile humans. We are meant to lean on each other. We're not meant to feel like we're alone on an island. Yeah. Feel like that's when people go insane.
And when I grew up and growing up in most of my adult life, I always used to be, when I was in my addiction, misanthropic or a misanthrope, which in other words is a person who has a general distaste for humanity, which has all changed now because I've dedicated the last 6 or 7 years of my life to service, to being of service in the medical field and as a caregiver and wildland firefighter. So I genuinely changed my perspective on that. But if I always felt like an outsider looking in, which is part of why we used to cope in the first place. But I always preferred isolation. I preferred to stay away from people. And as much as I tried to fight our nature, like you just mentioned, that we are social creatures, at the end of the day, you can't fight your genetics and your DNA or what's inherently part of being human, which is we are social creatures. And it's true. But during the pandemic, not only from the people being isolated by themselves, which is one of the reasons why there was such a spike in depression and addiction, even people who were quarantined with their families didn't fare well because, for example, husbands and wives, some of them have dysfunctional relationships. So, have you ever heard the phrase that distance makes the heart grow fonder?
Of course.
Yeah. So in some relationships, or a lot of relationships, the man and the woman can't, or the man and the man, or the woman and the woman can't be around each other 24 hours a day, because if they are, then they start to get on each other's nerves, and it's like you need a little bit of distance. And so what was saving a lot of relationships was people going to work and being gone for most of the day. And then when you get home and see each other at the end of the day or the night, you value your time together more. But in a lot of cases, it led to the opposite. It led to just a spike in domestic violence and divorce. And it's really interesting. One of the things I always joked about was all those relationship posts that you would see on Instagram, like date night with my bae, boo bae. Those started to disappear through the pandemic. If you notice, they weren't as prominent.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, you bring up a good point. Okay. Back to addiction. Because I feel like we can go in so many segues. I'm honestly procrastinating because I'm getting nervous to talk about my own addictions, and how my mom, who's been an addict since she was 15, how that has played a role. I told you this, but my older brother, who I've been the most close with growing up, he was addicted to heroin and meth for 3 years. And that was, I think, from my freshman year to my junior year of high school.
Speedballs. All that. Heroin and meth or cocaine. Yeah. When you mix the two, speedball.
Oof, that sounds scary.
Gnarly, but yeah.
Sounds addictive.
Your brother.
My brother, he gave me permission to come on here today and talk about his struggles and what he's been with. He didn't give me any specific quotes. I asked him if he wanted me to say anything specific, but I think he trusts me to tell his struggles in a way where it might help a lot of people out there. And
awesome. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes.
I know you're nervous, but this is so important, because a part of our friendship too with Megan is I'm a little older than her, or maybe a lot older, but I am trying to support you in every way that I can, because what we need as addicts, we need each other. We need people that we can depend on, because there's so many people out there that just shit on you and push you away and label you. And part of why I wanted to do this podcast with you specifically is because I want to see you reach your goals and dreams, as do I. And with you talking about this addiction in particular, I know this is something that's big for you, that you wanted to get off your chest. So I will try not to interrupt you anymore, but I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
I love you, Megan.
I love you too. I love you too, dog.
I love you too, Phil.
I love you, Phil. You're the best. I love you, Pablo.
Yeah. Pablo looks like he's high right now.
So
we're going to have to get him have an intervention later.
You know what? We might need to, because I actually found him. He appeared one day in my closet. He had needles in the back of his head. Not
Are you making
needles.
A joke right now?
No, I'm dead ass not. Straight up, I found him in my closet. He literally appeared in my closet one day at my mom's house. Which, maybe it was my mom hiding her needles. I don't know.
Wait, like needles?
Yeah.
No, what?
Not sewing needles.
These kind of needles.
Heroin needles.
Sewing heroin into your veins kind of needles.
Yeah, and
that is crazy.
Yeah, he just appeared there. I took the needles out. I washed him up.
Oh my God.
And he's been a recovered addict ever since. I don't think I can make that joke. I think I might cut that out.
Because I was going to say, I think that he's a little bit of bad juju, but if that's the case, that's awesome.
Some of my friends were saying that he has haunted energy, but he's only brought me good luck, and I feel like, we're both fighting demons out here, and I just really relate to him. He's just my comfort thing.
All right, Megan, get into it, because I think I got you off track, so I apologize.
It's okay.
Just everything you wanted to share about you and your brother. Let's go.
I was really proud of him for being able to be vulnerable and, let me come on here. And so he had actually just recently told me this a year ago. He told me that my mom was how he got into drugs. And it made me feel guilty for the times I was angry at him I'd be 15. I'd be at an ice cream shop downtown with my friends in the small town of Eureka. And I would see my brother riding on his bike around town. He'd have a wig on because maybe he just stole something from a store that he was banned at to go try to sell to buy more drugs. And so I would just be at these places with my friends at 15 years old, having to pretend like I didn't just watch my brother ride by on his bike. That was tough. It was also a tough decision to, I think with addicts, and I think if someone is out there watching and they have a loved one or a parent who is an addict and they struggle with addictions, I think it's very important and vital to realize that you have to set boundaries and when to do that. Because at some point, their addictions can cause you so much emotional distress, you can't continue on with your life. And a lot of times I felt like that would happen to me. And I would honestly just, it's a thing where you have to establish those boundaries. You have to put yourself before the addiction, even if it's your own mother. There was a point where I didn't talk to my mom for a year and a half because I didn't want to be an enabler for her actions. I wanted her to sit with herself and realize, why is my daughter not returning my calls, my mail, the letters I'm sending her? I think you don't have to feel guilty for not wanting a person who has addictive tendencies in your life if it damages you. And I think that's not talked about enough.
100% correct. 100%. Boundaries are huge. Yeah. Huge for the people who are in their addiction and the loved ones around them.
Absolutely. But back to my brother, when my brother had told me that my mom was the reason, it made me feel guilty for the times I was angry at him for being on drugs. I would tell him that I didn't want to see him unless he was sober. And I always felt guilty about that. But he had actually informed me that that was one of the reasons why he wanted to get sober, was because his little sister didn't want to see him, and that hit hard for him.
How much older is he than you?
He is, I believe, 15 years older.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So he's like 30, or maybe like 13 years older, so maybe he's like 35 right now. Mm-hmm. He's been sober for the past 5 years. He is now
Congratulations to your brother.
Yes.
Good job if you're watching, bro. I would support you all the way. Good shit.
He's, now he's my biggest inspiration.
That's awesome.
In the world. He's now one of the top personal trainers where he lives at in his county.
Damn.
He's fucking ripped. He looks like the WWE superstars that we used to watch together growing up.
Nice.
And I've watched him blossom into a beautiful version of himself, the person I knew he could be. And I'm just so proud of him. The fact that he was able to pull himself out of rock bottom, maybe multiple fucking times, in and out of jail, it inspires me, and I'm really proud of him for letting me tell a little bit about his story.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's the thing that kills me the most is when you are in your addiction and struggling, the ups and downs is so disheartening. Like you finally get clean, you get everything back, you build your life back, the relationships, then you relapse. Yeah. And that roller coaster of losing everything, starting over from nothing again, like I've been through that at least 3 times in my life, and it gets so old.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the one thing on the positive side though is a lot of people's biggest fear in this society is to lose their job or if they lose their house or whatever, they lose whatever their valued possession is, and they have a total mental breakdown. But once you've lost everything and gotten it all back, again, that gives you this confidence in yourself that you know that it makes you stronger. It removes that fear. Like for me personally, I'm not as far as I want to be or I should be in my mind in life. But the thing is I know if you took me right now, stripped me of everything, dropped me off in a street in any city or any state, that I would survive. I would make it. And I don't want to challenge that. I don't want to bet you for that. I don't want to go through that again, but I know because I've done that. I've literally been, I'll say it, like released from jail, and left, on the street with nothing. And I came back from that, so it's empowering that in that sense, if you let it be, because I think another aspect of being sober and overcoming addiction is you have to find a purpose in life, but you also have to have pride and build up your self-esteem, because it gets crushed. You can't look. I remember back in my days when I was struggling with opioid addiction, I couldn't look people in the eye. I walked like, hunched over. I was a lot shorter, just more. It was weird because now that I'm sober and I'm healthy and take care of myself, it's like I'm taller. I stand up, with my shoulders back, and I can look people in the eye again. But it's still hard to get that self-esteem back, because you carry this guilt around with you, and this pain of the people that you've hurt unintentionally, and the things that you've lost. And one of the ways that I counter that, which is part of why I'm willing to do this today, is by turning it into a positive, by helping other people to learn from it and speaking to other people. I worked in a detox at a rehab for almost 2 years, helping other alcoholics and addicts get their lives back. And so, I don't have a fancy car and all of the other things that, I guess a lot of people would consider success, but I do know that I've come a long way, and I've helped a lot of people, and I've saved some lives in my time. So if I was to die tomorrow, I would be happy and die with a clean conscience, because, I've been able to use my story and my experience to help other people. And that's the whole thing, is like, you can't regret spending the rest of your life kicking yourself and being down on yourself for all the years that you lost and all the relationships you've destroyed. You've got to turn it into a positive, because that's the only way for me personally that I can continue to go forward and be positive in sobriety.
I really appreciate that you said that, and kind of just how that is how you keep going.
Yeah.
It's you can't get down on yourself about it. If you do, it's just you're stuck there. It doesn't end. You have to get up. You don't really have another choice.
But it's so much easier said than done.
It's so much
Megan,
easier said than done.
Like the level of shame and guilt, every once in a while things will pop up or trigger you or remind you, and it's a daily, I'm not going to lie, it's a daily struggle.
I think something that is really overlooked, and I got a question about this on my Instagram. I'll pop it up on the screen, but it was just kind of saying, no one really talks about the crazy stuff or the desperate things that you do that you kind of normalize in your mind. Mm-hmm. And you're doing these desperate things. For me, I've been addicted to a lot of things. I am very aware that I have that addictive gene. I've had problems with drinking. I've had problems with food, binge eating and then starving myself. I've had problems with cocaine. I still have problems with weed. I've been smoking weed every day for the past 6-7 years of my life. In no way am I going to sit here and talk about my mom's addictions and my brother's addictions and not talk about my own. What kind of person would I be?
Yeah, and on that note too, I really don't want to come across as being, because this is one of the things that I hate in recovery, is people talking down to you or like they're better than you or be condescending. And I really want you guys to know that we aren't coming from that place. We're not preaching from the pulpit. We're preaching from the pew, I think is the phrase. Because anything that I say or would recommend for someone else to do isn't something that I wouldn't do for myself. But I forgot what I was going to say. I lost my train of thought.
I think my goal here in life is to break that cycle. I think anyone who has a parent with alcoholism, with addiction, who then their parents, in my situation, my grandparents had that alcoholism, that addiction, and it just gets passed down through genetics. But then you throw in all the environmental factors, maybe the mental illness. A lot of that can add to it. And I think, my goal in the end is to break that cycle.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I have broken that. And the scariest thing is I can't promise that I will break it.
That you won't break it. Can't
Yeah.
promise that you won't.
I can't, I can't
Or
promise that I will break the cycle. Only time will tell that.
That's
but
true.
Sitting here talking to an audience right now, I think are the right steps in the right direction.
Yeah, and so I remember what I was going to say is we're not coming from a place of judgment or blame, because I don't know what the reaction to this podcast is going to be, but there's a lot of, so, you smoking weed and things like that, and like, for example, I mean, I vape. All these things can be considered addictions and drugs. There's so many. Caffeine's a drug, nicotine's a drug.
Yeah.
Weed, marijuana. If you guys are doing any of those things out there, I mean, the main thing that it boils down to is it's not like we're telling you not to do drugs or what drugs to do, and we don't want to get lost in the sauce. But essentially, is you have to look at, does this chemical, are you putting a chemical in your body that changes the way you feel? And if that, so that could be any drug, anything. It could be caffeine, like I was mentioning. But you have to look at how does that impact your life. Is this substance, whatever, say weed, cannabis, if this is your use of it and consumption of it is causing you to lose relationships or your job, if it's negatively impacting your life in more of a way than it's positively benefiting it, that's when it becomes a problem. And there's people out there that are, for whatever it is that you use or that you do. I mean, alcohol is a drug, and I think, honestly, it's one of the worst drugs.
I completely fucking agree with you.
But yet it's legal, and if you do it in moderation and it's not causing you to beat your wife or to beat your children or to commit crimes or to go out and drive and crash your car and endanger other people, if you're not hurting anyone else or yourself, and it's not negatively impacting your life, then we're not, I'm not making any judgments on that. I mean, that's the thing is it's all a matter of how that is interfering with your daily life and your happiness. So there's, we're not saying to be abstinent on everything, but you just have to really weigh out the risk and versus reward of the pros and cons with whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. And to kind of add to that, I do want to say that in no way, shape, or form am I sitting here and telling you that I am a role model for addiction, because I'm not. But here's the thing. If you can't be a role model, you can still be a voice. And I 100% believe that. Kind of talking about drug addictions in Gen Z versus millennials. I feel like in Gen Z, especially like with social media, I want to say, I mean, social media addiction is one thing, but I also think like you can kind of go to social media, and I think it can absolutely fuel drug addiction. I mean, you go on TikTok and there's Coke Talk. I was on Coke Talk when I was doing Coke. It would make me feel better about myself. I would listen to Lil Peep over and over again while I was doing Coke because it made me feel better.
Wasn't there just a TikTok trend? I just saw it in the news yesterday or the day before about the gallon challenge. That trend, or I don't really know what it was because I'm not on TikTok, but
it's basically a gallon and you fill it half with water and then half with like vodka, and then I believe you squirt like a whole thing of Mio in there. But it's just like, gosh.
Yeah, and how many people ended up in the hospital or died from that?
And there was just a TikTok trend not that long ago where like people take videos of themselves Xanaxed out, and their eyes are rolling, and it's just like, if you don't think social media fuels drug addiction, take a good fucking look around.
It definitely does.
Absolutely.
It's something to think about too, because I know one of our ideas that we talked about for a podcast was analyzing social media and the impact that that's had on civilization and society, right? But definitely, without a doubt, social media has fueled drug use and addiction in ways that's unparalleled to media ever before, because there was never, you didn't have this gallon trend that people are daring each other to do. I mean, you would have, when I was a kid, we had a circle of friends. We didn't have TikTok. And so the most reach that these things would get is like your school. So if everybody's daring to do this dangerous trend, it would spread through your school, maybe to the next school. But now with TikTok, the users and the amount of people that are on that app daily and getting exposed to these trends at all sorts of ages, the reach is unparalleled. So there's no doubt that social media has completely accelerated addiction.
Absolutely.
And glamorized it.
And to give you a stat, I don't know the correct stat because I couldn't find it before this, but I'm pretty sure there's a stat out there. It says that I believe 90% of women, when they first sign up for TikTok, or women, girls of any age, they sign up for TikTok in the US, 90% of them in the first 5 minutes are shown videos of self-mutilation, self-harm, drug addiction. For me, when I couldn't be on TikTok anymore because it would make me depressed. I was noticing I would be scrolling through TikTok. Maybe I didn't even want to be scrolling. It just felt so addictive to me.
The algorithm is evil.
The algorithm's fucked up. I mean, in the US, the algorithm is basically designed to make us depressed. And I don't want to get political about it, but I know like the algorithm in China is very different. What they're shown may be like videos that would make them more intelligent. It's not designed to make them depressed, to fuel drug addiction, to fuel body self-harm videos, but and the US is.
Some people will say that the algorithm and AI is just designed to give you more of what you like, or it's recommending what it thinks you're going to enjoy, that it doesn't have an evil agenda to show you self-harm videos and things like that. But everything with social media, specifically TikTok, but from Netflix to TikTok to YouTube, every new feature on it that it has was something that's been researched and put there and designed to compel you to reach you at a deeper level, working on your dopamine receptors and the whole, like, when it shows the countdown to the next video, because on TikTok, it doesn't have, it just automatically plays videos, right? Like one after the other. There's no countdown. Yeah. Right? This is what I heard. But like in YouTube and Netflix, that whole countdown thing was, part of it was meant to have people, to keep them engaged and keep them viewing. These are all little things. The whole invention of the like button from Facebook was meant to give you a dopamine hit every time you hit like.
Speaking of that dopamine, I mean, that's the thing that gets people addicted to social media. I mean, we are given an environment right here that's constantly stimulating us and giving us that dopamine. They have literally created an environment that stimulates us to get addicted.
And not only does it stimulate you, I believe that there's a dark psychology behind all social media. And I'm not saying it's all evil. I mean, it's something that we all use for entertainment. But it's not only designed to keep you addicted and using, it's designed to cater to some of the worst traits that we have as human beings.
Oh, narcissism.
Narcissism.
Huge.
And egomania, megalomania. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because with TikTok in particular, this app is so successful because it takes you from anonymity to celebrity status. I mean, some of the top people on TikTok have more not views, but subscribers or whatever you call them on TikTok, fans, followers, then some countries have populations.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about millions and millions of people, and that's directly playing into your ego, our egos as human beings, because it's giving you an audience. It's making you a celebrity.
Yeah.
It's very dark, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Absolutely not. Back to, so kind of a question that was asked, and it brought up a good point for me. I don't think addiction is about the drug. For me, it was never about the coke. It was never about the sex. It was never about the food. It was never about the drinking, the weed. It was always about the feeling inside of me that felt empty, that felt like I needed to fill.
Exactly.
Addiction is not about the drug. It's about what you're feeling inside of you that makes you do it.
And also, it's not particularly helpful to compare weed to heroin to PCP to whatever. Because you're exactly right. And it goes back to what I said earlier. The true measure of addiction being deleterious, I'll use a big word, or dangerous for your health or bad for you is the behavior and the consequences that it manifests. Because you can remove all drugs, take all drugs away. There's people that I know that are what you would call dry drunks, people that have they've removed the drug of alcohol, but they still have the same behavior. And even if you eliminated drugs, you can look at sex, look at shopping, look at gambling. All of these things, if they're done in excess and they're negatively impacting your life, that's what you look at rather than comparing which drug is worse or does this compare to that. It's just addiction. It's how is this affecting your life? Is it negatively impacting it on a bigger scale? Is it doing more to damage you than it is to benefit you? And if it's something that you can't control, which addiction is essentially, then it's a bad thing, no matter what substance or what activity it is.
Yeah. Getting back to my, what time are we at, by the way? Just so I have a nice gauge.
52. Oh, I thought it was, oh, man.
Okay.
40, I thought it was 40.
So I really want to talk about my mom for a little bit, but I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible.
I'd love to talk about your mom, too.
Hell yeah.
Here, just give me 1 second.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
no worries. Okay, so I was thinking I'd talk about my mom and kind of how that impacted me. Because I had a lot of questions to ask you, but I really like this conversational type of thing as well.
I do too, but it goes by so fast.
It goes by way too fast.
I do want to cover the questions though, because I want as much like viewer participation as possible. So like, let's do it. Let's include them all.
I have a story about my rock bottom. If you're not comfortable with sharing that, that's okay.
So, Megan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I would like to get into your relationship with your mother because
Oof. I'm just kidding.
you've opened up to me before a little bit about your relationship, and it's so heartbreaking. And whatever you're comfortable with talking about, that's cool. I don't want to go to any places that you don't necessarily want to go, but I feel like this is something important for you to get out, like maybe cathartic. So, and it's always heartbreaking to me because I love my mother. I love my mother so much, and I've put her through hell. But your relationship is a little different because my mom is a normie. My sister's a normie. So tell me about your relationship with your mom and her being an addict. This is what confuses me too, is she's a drug addict. Yeah. And I know you guys don't really have a relationship now, but how could she... I don't understand how she could treat you the way that she does or look at you in this light for the things that you do, or how I think you mentioned that you were sort of like the black sheep or an outcast of your family because of addiction, but what would they expect?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you. So I think with my mom, you kind of have to go back. I mean, she started drinking when she was 15. Her dad was...
Oh, me too.
Her dad was... Me too.
Wow.
Her dad...
15? Wow, okay.
I started partying with older guys when I was 15, when I was a sophomore. My mom didn't care where I went. My mom didn't care what I did. I'm lucky I made decent decisions for the amount of freedom that I was given at such a young age that I could have done very bad things with. But to take it back, my mom has been an addict since she was 15. Alcohol has been her main thing. She hurt her back later in life. She started to become addicted to Vicodin. She was taking Vicodin and drinking alcohol when she was pregnant with me. I know a lot of family members thought that I was going to be born with like a cleft lip or something. Very lucky. Very thankful for that. Mm-hmm. My mom, throughout, as far as I can remember, I remember being 3-4 years old. My mom would spend all day in bed. I mean, it was Vicodin and wine or Vicodin and vodka, whatever, She'd just sleep her days away, and I would be in the kitchen, 3 or 4 years old. I'd be missing kindergarten, and she wouldn't bother to get up to take me. And I'd be getting the pots and pans out of the kitchen, climbing up on the counter, speeding myself, hitting the pots and pans, drumming.
Do the drums, yeah.
Do the drum. And, I'd have to entertain myself. I might have thought that was fun back then, but looking back, I had to raise myself. Mm-hmm. I had to grow up fast.
Yep.
And that's where her addiction kind of led me. I wasn't nurtured as a child. I didn't have that emotional support. I had emotional neglect.
Yeah.
I would lie to she would rehearse with me before CPS came over.
What?
Yes. Because we would get SARB letters because she wouldn't bother to take me to school. And I just want to say that she was about 41 when she had me. She is now, 63, 65? I don't even know. She's still addicted to drinking. Now it's half a bottle of this thing of vodka. She drinks half of it every day.
It's insane. It's insane how at that age you could still continue that sort of drinking because it just destroys your pancreas and your liver.
It's insane to me that she is still in a state of denial.
Yep.
I have tried. You know, people might say, well, haven't you just gone up to her, had an intervention, be like, you're an addict, you're my mother, please stop. I want you to love me. I want you to give me emotional support. That's not how it works.
No.
It took me 21 years to realize that I was not the problem. My whole life, I had thought maybe if I was a better child, a better kid, if I was a happier baby, would that have been enough for her to choose me over drugs?
I'm not the problem. You're the fucking problem, Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
No.
But
damn.
Honestly,
it's not you. It's not you. And I'm so sorry for what you've been through, Megan.
Thank you. And I just want to say to anyone out there, if you have a mother or a father or a loved one who is an addict and who is struggling and you can't understand and you think it's your fault, it is not your fault. You know, all of those thoughts that I had were complete bullshit. They're complete bullshit. It is not your fault. You cannot change an addict unless they want to change themselves.
That is way too much responsibility for you to take on because we cannot control anybody else's actions. But no, it's not your fault. And that's where boundaries come into play. Yes. Is you have to, it's so, trust me, I've lived it with my family members on both sides of it, and dealing with other people that have addictions is there's nothing that you can, there's things you can do to help them change, but forcing your mother, trying to sit her down and have an intervention, we could do that every week. Yeah. And it's not going to change anything until she's ready to change. And that's the bottom line. I've been around addicts and addiction my whole life. And that's the most unfortunate thing, but you have to detach yourself from that outcome. And this is even harder to say, is I have friends right now that I've had to tell them, I love you, I care about you, and I really hope that you stop, but I feel like I'm going to get a call one day, you're going to be dead. So I'm taking this opportunity to tell you I love you, and please don't. I wish you would get help, or anything I could do to help you, I will, but I'm going to tell you goodbye. And you have to get to that point. It's very hard in your mind. You have to detach yourself from that person and accept the fact that this person's probably going to die. Yeah. So
you have to, even though it's fucked up.
It is.
You have to come to that conclusion. You have to prepare yourself. I mean,
because if you don't, then you're going to go through a lifetime of heartache trying to control and put expectations on them. You have to, be supportive and help them at every turn that you can. And I'll continue to do that, and you should too. But you have to detach yourself from their behavior and the outcome and just get to that place in your mind.
Absolutely. I mean, if I can get to a point to where I'm thinking about my mom and what she can't do, what she can't get rid of, and I will get to that dark place in my mind where she's now getting blood transfusions often, which is a sign that your body is failing. Her addictions are killing her. Mm-hmm, and that's something that I just have to accept. I mean, I think it might be easier for me, and I don't know if this is too fucked up to say on a podcast, but I've just always have had this thought in my head, and tell me in the comments if this is fucked up or crazy or sounds crazy, but in my mind, my mom died when I was 15. Now, there's this one night, I was 15, I was a sophomore, my mom and I were home alone. Her boyfriend, who is her enabler, to this day.
Hate the enablers and the codependency.
See, and that's the thing. It seems like with addicts, they cling on to an enabler.
They do.
And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. You know, is the enabler should they be just as guilty as the addict?
Yes, they should be.
I think so too.
And I don't like to make excuses for people, but I could tell you I got to start on a very bad drug because of a friend that kept pushing it on me, and he was more than an enabler, and finally caught me at the right moment to where I was just depressed and tired of feeling the way that I felt every day, and I just wanted to do anything to change that feeling, and he kept pushing and caught me at the right moment. And I also knew another guy at a detox at a rehab center that I was at, and you talk about, I try not to judge people, I really don't, and I don't like to label people, and I'm sorry, but I'm just speaking from the heart right now. The people that enable and that purposefully get other people on drugs are just the lowest frequency scum individuals. And not to say that they can't change, but it's one of the worst things that you could do as a human being. I knew a guy that he was a heroin addict and a dealer. And this guy, man, so working at Detox, I would have patients, and they would tell me their stories when we were doing the intake, and they were heartbreaking. And just when I thought I heard the worst story, another person would come in. And it really was hard to take. And a lot of the stuff I've had to take on emotionally was difficult. But it also, just looking at a positive side of everything, it really makes you grateful for what you do have. Yeah. So anyways, but the enablers and the codependency people, it's just so horrible to be involved in that. And yes, to answer your question, they do have responsibility. They are culpable.
Okay, so now I kind of just want to take the opportunity. So I did post something on my Instagram story, and we got some questions back, and
Sweet.
I'll pop them up on the screen. But you know, someone said, okay, wait, actually, I'm gonna play this voice memo because this was the question that I was most interested in answering. So my friend Emily from Humboldt.
What's up, Emily?
What's up, Emily? I'm just going to play the voice memo.
Most of the time, 21-year-olds think that they already have a problem, and when they try to talk to people about it, they really don't get recognized or get sympathy because they just turned 21 and it isn't that big of a problem, and it's just the way how life goes. Like, you don't have a problem, but that's really how it starts, is somebody tells you that you don't have a problem and you continue to do it, and either you believe them or you don't, because people around you see that it's not causing a problem that big, but to you it is.
Well, here's what I'm going to say to that quickly, because I know we got to wrap up, but addiction, the disease of addiction is a progressive disease. It's a perfect example. Think of the first time you used and think of the last time you used, and everything that you felt and you were going through at that time compared to the very last time. You'll see a big contrast, which basically means that it's a progressive disease. So someone that's 21, doesn't matter how old you are, if they're struggling with addiction and you see that it's negatively impacting their life, you have to validate those people, and it is valid, because if you can stop this as early as possible, you're going to save that person a lifetime of misery and pain. So I think you shouldn't delegitimize the age. Shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a killer of all ages and all people, and the sooner you can stop it, the better.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think if my mom had quit back then, you know, she was addicted by 15. If she had stopped when she was 21, you know, maybe things would have been a whole lot fucking different.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to play the next clip she said, because I just thought it was also very interesting.
Yes, that's totally fine. I missed you, Megan. Hope you're doing good, and I'm so happy that you're doing this podcast and I'm bringing up this conversation, because honestly, even recently, I've gone through that, where I was going through a problem, and I've been drinking since I was younger. You used to be at the parties with us and see me drinking since I was younger, but as soon as I hit 21, it's more of like it hits you because you have more responsibilities. And so at one point I was like, I have a problem, and told many people about it, and they were just like, no, you're just 21, it's a normal thing to go through, like, you're doing fine. But I feel like if I had somebody being like, no, like, that is a problem, like, let me help you step back, it wouldn't have been as big of a problem when it happened than when it ended. Also, the longer you watch people drink around you, like, even though it could be the dopest person, the most fucking healthy, vegan, almond drinking milk girl could be hiding it the best ways. And I'm not saying that you are, obviously, but I'm saying like,
But I was.
Sounds
and
like
she
it.
brings up a great fucking point.
Mm-hmm.
I posted, pictures of me drinking almond milk with tequila for my 21st birthday. From that
disgusting.
post, someone who looks at that post would never guess, oh, this girl has a problem with drinking. She has. I've had a point where, when I got fresh out the psych ward about 10 months ago, I got out and I did Molly for 3 days straight. Met the wrong people, did Molly for 3 days straight. Then went on a 14-day tequila bender. And, a part of my rock bottom, I was waking up and continuing drinking. Then that 14th day, I finally woke up and I actually called both of my older brothers and told them that I needed help. And that was really embarrassing for me. Very rock bottom.
Yeah.
And I don't like thinking about that, but I think it's important, and anyone could have a problem no matter how they portray themselves on social media.
Yep.
And that's how I kind of wanted to end the podcast.
Very good. And again, no judgment, no blame. Like, we've all hit our rock bottoms and done things that we're ashamed of. The important part to focus on is the future and the present times. So I just want to end with saying thank you, guys. Please like and subscribe, and we'll continue the conversation next time because there's still a lot more to say. But I wanted to mention this too. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with addiction, get help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You could reach out to me through the socials or YouTube. If you have any questions, if you're anything that you're struggling with, anything I could do to help you guys, I will. So reach out because I've lived it. I've been there and came through the other side, and still a daily struggle, but ask for help. And yes, don't, and everything that people are struggling with is valid.
Absolutely.
Don't minimize addiction because it's a monster.
Yeah, no matter what age. And you can also reach out to me in my socials. All my links will be down below for my Instagram. Last thing I just want to say is shout out Pod Dog Studios. Love Phil. Thank you guys
Phil.
so much for watching.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say, here's my thing with ending addiction. I think vulnerability is the key. I think opening up and having those conversations with your friends, with someone you trust, I think that's how we stop this addiction, especially in Gen Z.
Yes.
Be vulnerable. Bring light to the subject. And
Bring light.
That's all I got to say.
And stop casting people out just because they're struggling with addiction. It doesn't make them dirty. It doesn't make them a bad person. They're still redeemable. We need to rally around these people and stop ostracizing them in society because you're still a human being. And I love you. We love you. Thank you guys so much. Participate, like, subscribe.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.